Welcome. Water is life. Cedar. It is its own intention. Cedar is a very hard wood. Dense material plane, it dissolves. That's which is not healthy here. Huh. Love it. Magic. In all my years of loving what we know of as magic, I don't believe I've ever changed the mature sense that magic is simply our ability to access influence, power that is beyond the rules we know as normal. We have the innate ability to access a world of influence over our reality in a normal way that is beyond what we've thought was normal. Let me say this differently. Certain influence needs faith as a first ingredient. And it's the difference between trying to make a cake without the flour and then adding the flour once it's cooked and doing it in a proper order. Faith itself is a spirit, it's a presence, it's our gift of what we are before we form it. So if you try to give it form once, how shall we say, the reality has been engaged. You've already lost your ability to change it. This is ultimately alchemy, but I'd like to introduce a very simple understanding. Alchemy needs to be understood more as, at the very least, a two-step process. We take what is and we bring it back into its essence. Then we have this essence to create something else. Thus, it is necessary for you to alchemize yourself. This is one of the first steps in learning what you need to learn. To alchemize yourself is to heal. It's also to change direction, so to make new decisions. This cannot be understated. If you don't have a clear direction, that direction needs to begin in faith. Because when you surrender your will into what's possible, you're embodying the trust that what you will create is beyond what you initially imagined. And thus, this changes you. You become something that you didn't used to be, and eventually you understand. When we place understanding first, we're essentially saying, I'm only going to live within what's been possible already. I'm only going to live within not only what I believe is possible, but what the people around me believe is possible. If everybody did this, we'd never grow. We'd never learn. When you choose to be someone who can alchemize yourself, you reclaim what you've used as dysfunction and turn it into something, what? We're starting with faith, right? But your faith is not, I don't want to say it's not blind, because in many ways it is. But the faith itself stems from a place of knowing. You know within yourself where trust is. If you choose not to trust that, that's a choice. And you have to learn to register where your choices are coming from. Knowing ourselves in this way is crucial, and I am learning of myself in ways that absolutely astounding. Slowing it down. Today I have a cold. I have a cold, and I am changing much faster than I have in a while. I would like to encourage you again. When you have colds and flus, non-life-threatening because of your state of health and the limits of this malady, I invite you to think of this as something that's helping you. Now, when you've done that, you are putting your faith in a place that I'm inviting you to put it. And this is the advantage of a teacher. Teachers can teach what we know well. This is something I know well. You can tune into yourself and say, do I trust that? Do I trust him in this way? And do every time. Please do. Just do so with a soft heart. My invitation is that you allow colds and flus to move through you. When you engage them with the faith that they have a purpose in this world, they have a purpose that helps you transmute negative elements on the material plane. Think of it as many maladies on the material plane know you, and they know what you do not need. The simple version is that the material plane level zeroes in on that which it eats. That's what its food is. And if you can learn to trust that these maladies have been designed to take away that which you don't need, you learn to do this deeper change. What you're saying is, don't gatekeep. I will allow the world to sweep through me and take away that which I don't need. And it does probably scare you at first, or for the first 10 times. Allow these, because you don't know what's going to be taken away. But when you wake up and retain the trust that the choices you've made have a deep purpose, that you are becoming a part of a system that's designed for you. It's designed for good lives. You'll find that you don't stay sick for long, and it isn't as miserable. And amidst this sickness, you are being retuned into who you truly are. Today, I cast a spell for some space before the class. I have some things to say that needs to be pure, and it may be to your advantage to listen later or at a time when you know you can be present. Several days ago, Friday, I awoke in the middle of the night with lightning moving through me. This lightning is very much what it sounds like. It's a deeper, more intense electrical energy connected to soul, reaching down through us. And when it moves through you, you know it. It does indeed function similarly to a cold or a flu, as I've described. It enhances, it enlivens that which is beautiful and true, and it burns away that which is not. So to surrender to the experience, at this point, I love it. It's also normal enough that I don't get lost in kind of self-doubt or exuberance. I'm just like, cool, this is happening. And this time, however, I wasn't able to calm down. I felt almost a little petulant, and I was like, wait a second, I don't like this. I didn't want to sit up and meditate. I tried. I was like, meh. I just couldn't do it. And I do tend to respect this when I can. If I'm repeatedly resistant in a way that is unhealthy for me, that exposes itself. But if the resistance is kind of unusual, I'm like curious, well, what's going on? So I lay back down. And when I laid down, I tuned into the Roscrucians. It was a video. I've not learned about them much. I've had a positive opinion, and I suppose I really lumped it in with a lot of other schools of thought, like plausibly interesting, but not relevant to me. I've done this for a while. In fact, some of my greatest self-doubt has been that the incredible process I've gone through to channel this work, to share this work, has been so divorced from external material influences that I wonder about myself. Like, why is it? I'm here talking about oneness and I'm not linked in. I'm here extolling the ability to collaborate and find coherence between the unity of many colors and many traditions. And I'm like resistant to so many other teachings. And then I listen to this. Now I want to reinforce, I don't find much on YouTube that excites me. I have what I consider to be a bit of a personality flaw where it's sort of a built-in naivete in a way. Like when I was young, really uplifted the sense of being positive in the face of anything challenging or negative, and really outlived that as, how shall I say, it has consistently brought me difficulty to constantly be seeing good in things that are showing me otherwise. Well, think of it this way. When you fight with what is by trying to say it's something else, what happens? Seriously, what happens? Now, I suppose the dramatic belief is that you can make it into that. You could say, oh, I'm so powerful with my positivity that I change what this is into the positivity. This has some relevance. It's also the root of quite a bit of dysfunctional relationships when people believe they can turn each other into something that they aren't. To bridge this gap, to become something other than you are, is to alchemize it, and it demands faith. You can't make someone else do that. I can blast you with all the positivity in the world. I can tell you over and over again that you are a pure light, a pure child of God. Ultimately, it is not my presence and my intensity and my optimism that will make you this. It is you. It is you. And the fact that I can be present in a way that helps alchemize your experience, your faith is the essence of the changes that will happen to you. This is already alchemy. You're already doing it. And as I've learned that every power has the ability to be misplaced, misplayed, I've recognized that for a long time I've been using this attempt to bring optimism and to sort of say, come on, have faith in this optimism. You can be this, in circumstances where people have been showing me there's something else quite clearly. And thus I have been doubting myself and my own ability to measure what's real. Sarah, good morning. My faith invited me long ago to learn to trust the voices in my mind. Through this trust, I stepped deeper and deeper until I met Thoth. In this meeting, I found a sanity, a clarity, a joy, an inspiration that surpassed anything else I was finding. And I was listening to this more than anything that I found out loud. And then I listened to this Roscrucian overview. And to my shock, I didn't resist it. I didn't wrestle with it. I didn't struggle with it. I don't feel naive when I tell you this is describing me. And as I allowed this feeling without second guessing much, I tuned in to two voices. And the two voices have been two teachers. Thoth introduced me to them this year, and I've rarely gotten through. It has not been consistent. And the two teachers said they're just one teacher. They are my witnessing of a masculine and feminine side to an androgynous, pure essence, a spirit, a spiritual teacher. Moreover, this teacher knows me well. Thoth knows me, but I have to say there's always something, despite the constant presence and insight, there's something less personal about his presence. I've been invited to recognize that it really is a relationship between the magnitude of what I am and what he is. That we are so dissimilar that there are certain intimacies and a sense of camaraderie that just aren't possible. And that's fine. This teacher has this. And they revealed to me something. The essence of another lifetime that I led, that I've had hints of, with a little twist. They said, talk to yourself. Now, I find this amusing because I was trained years ago to sort of be at peace with certain boundaries that I've been taught within. And sometimes I'm brought back to them and told, this was really fragile. Like I've been honoring a paper wall that I could have pushed through, but I was invited not to, so I didn't. And in many ways, it was a training in trust and gentleness and waiting, patience. It was possible for me to talk to this part of myself as a separate self, and it immediately brings my sense of reverence into a process that I've been sort of more mechanical with, like stepping through the motions. And in this reverence, what I've known as my spirit tree just gained depth. I'm talking suddenly in the middle of the night to myself from another lifetime. And this self told me that in a past life, I was taught things that were not possible to spread. I was taught the need to share guidance and information that were not possible to share within that time, within the way that I was invited, that I was recruited, that I was uplifted to do. And I had in that timeline to agree to reincarnate with the purpose of teaching this knowledge. So much came into coherence. I listened more to this video, this Roscrucian video. They are describing the fundamental tenets of so much of what I've been taught from Thoth as I've experienced it. But the beauty of this is just, it's beyond the measures that I've known. I have engaged Thoth constantly, often for day after day, throughout the day, over and over again. And every once in a while, I've been able to question, like, does this even make sense? Like, why am I talking to Thoth all the time? Like, don't you think he'd like introduce me around to some peoples? Or, like, it caused me to doubt myself. Well, every once in a while, I've received the hint that, yeah, they're here. When I engage with him, I'm surrounded. I am part of this. I am of this. And it's a little more complex than me just talking to this one dude. and it flowers. Now it flowers. It's like a wild flowing flower of realization, of attunement, of acceptance, of embrace. And all of a sudden, I'm in this community and I can see the depth and I can feel the different personalities. And I'm blind in this space, but they're saying hello and they're giving me their name before they start to talk, which is really helpful. The intimacy of this is beyond what I've experienced much. I've experienced something akin to this in like briefer moments, but I have a sense that this is changing in a way that's going to last. They started asking me questions about my most, when I say intimate, I just mean like very present with my thought process, tuning me into challenges and questions that I've been just carrying over the past couple weeks and asking me about them. And they're asking single questions, and I'm feeling the presence of the spirit of the thoughts. And then they're asking me just simple questions, sometimes with just one word. And as they ask, I know the answer from a space that's beyond what I've known. Now, again, I've had exposure to this dynamic, but the incredible, it's a new level of it. And all of a sudden, I have this complete peace. I fit in. Like I fit in. It makes sense of what I am in a way that, oh my goodness, I'm going to be a lot more fun to be around people. Believe me. I've been holding on by like my fingernails to understandings that are difficult to retain without the context. I've lacked the context. And what they've told me is you needed to do it this way. Because comes next. High comes immediately. Sarah, thank you for being here. I sit in theirs. This is one of the things that's just so unbelievably cool, all right? One of the first Rosicrucian initiations was that a student had to learn to visit the temple, the Rosicrucian temple, in spirit. You had to begin to learn. And this is what I've done with Thoth. So Thoth doesn't exist in my field. I have to go to his. And we've talked about this a lot, the necessity, the central importance of remembering your commitment to your spiritual guidance, to Thoth in particular, when you're in extremes, when you're scared, when you're overwhelmed, when you're confused, when you're changing. You have to be the one that moves yourself into the trust of his temple. This is how they understood it for hundreds of years. And truly, the Rosicrucian school it's rooted deeper. This is one incarnation of the school of thought that traces all the way back to Atlantis. And this stuff is known. You could go find it on YouTube. The way they embrace you depends on your faith, bringing yourself to them first. And I do this all the time. I just did it I did it completely blind. I didn't know what I was doing. So nothing huge in the immediate changes. It's just an understanding of everything that I've got to share. When what I put together through listening to more Rosicrucian information, why this matters, something just clicked on a level that just, it makes me want to like cry from the depths of joy. And I'm led back to a time, 1998. I was living in New York City and I was starting to get little tiny messages. So we're talking like I would get a little impression, like a little thought ball, and I would write it down as a sentence. And it would change me. And it was the most exciting thing in my entire universe. And one night, I traced the feeling. I traced it. Like I received this little ball of light and I turned towards where it had come from in a way, although it's not directional, but I just moved with it. backwards. And apparently this is really important. And in so doing, I found myself in the memory that I'd lived another lifetime and that I had prepared myself to incarnate in this lifetime and needed to connect with guidance and information that I was leaving for myself. And I cried and cried and cried. I cried as someone who had chosen to incarnate, who had made decisions before this lifetime to be what I was learning to become, and that it was working. It was my first experience of any level of trust that I was anything beyond this life. I'm sure I had hints of it, but it was not a part of my personality. I made fun of people who talked about reincarnation. I'm like, oh yeah, everyone was Cleopatra. And it remains ridiculous that so many people engage memory of other lifetimes in this way. Yet, sometimes the trust has to come first. And the trust came first then. And I'm with that memory of myself more than I've ever been since then. In the past several days, I'm just like, oh my God, it worked. It worked. They're slowing me down. They introduced me to a space of reverence this morning. They reinforced heavily to me that I have not maintained my peacefulness enough to stay with them until now. And now I'm just ready to learn the next level. But I do. I break the peace on a level that's not okay. I get too angry. My emotions are still too volatile to stay with what I learned. But they're like, hey, this is just what you're learning. Like, they're helping me chill on it. Normally, when I reflect on this, I feel like a failure. They're like, look, that breaks the peace. Just bring yourself back. So this is a much slower time talking. And for that reason, I did push people away ahead of time. It will be more valuable in repeat. Now, it's an incredible amount of influence to be able to affect people in this way. And the only way that I could learn to do it is to surrender to it and to keep doing that. In the Roscrucian schools, 12 students surround one, and the one is disembodied. The one is a spiritual teacher who lives in spirit. This is how I've been learning all along. And then I am able to play a similar role for others. And the intention here is that I can influence you wherever you are. Much of this knowledge, much of this wisdom was incubated through thousands of years of human history that was subsumed in karma. When history is run by karma, everyone could know full well that the karmic forces were not going to be defeated anytime soon. You couldn't anticipate a reality where the karmic forces would leave. And thus, it's not just like getting angry. Like my anger, my volatile anger reactions can ruin my affinity, my connection with this spiritual school. And it does often. And then I bring myself back to it. In a world full of violence, where there are cyclical wars that you could just, it's going to happen, there was no prayer of much of this knowledge being consistently dominant. But they needed to stay alive and continue to influence things, which is why Thoth has been here. Hermetic knowledge has guided some of the most incredible leaders throughout all of human history. It's always been here. And plenty of beings have been learning in these ways, tuning in, trusting, bringing their faith into a space where they can alchemize themselves and tune in even more deeply, and thus gain the guidance that is relevant for the time. Most major transformation in world culture has been a gift from angels. It's always been this way. So like our myth of the lone hero and inventor has always been pure bullshit. It's an idea entirely fabricated around a false conception of reality. And many of the greatest teachers, many of the greatest inventors will tell you this. Franklin and Einstein, Maxwell, like scientists who made major breakthroughs, who took the limits and brought them into a much deeper space, all were incredibly spiritual. They would say so. Tesla regularly communicated that he learned his inventions by communicating with other beings, etheric beings. The breakthroughs always come from such people, and then the culture has solidified around it with a false understanding, just like with Jesus. It is these lies that are coming to an end. And they're coming to an end because karmic reality is starting to fracture. So whereas 300 years ago, you knew full well there was going to be a war at least every 20 years, often more frequent than that throughout much of Europe for sure. Now, we're looking at a time where the power of the karmic forces can actually be held at bay. The remaining forces that channel loose pain into hate are dying. And as a result, it's time to make changes that were not possible. Mystery schools that had to remain silent and hidden no longer do. Hello, Janie. Sarah, I will ask. No. The 12 has been overemphasized for some of the wrong reasons. It's been understood from the wrong perspective. It's more like 12 at any given time, but you don't need to identify in like tight clusters of 12. None of us do. What we do is we can be present in a geometry that crystallizes Christ consciousness in a way that then we carry and can spread to others. And in any given moment, there's a power to being able to connect to 12 at once. This is the unity of the 12 chakras. This is the unity of the 12 signs of the zodiac. This is the unity of light. So we just bring it back into coherence. There is potential and power in having 12 people identify with each of the 12 rays, and then you can do things. But it's not fundamentally necessary to stay like that, like in some kind of coherence group. It's more time to time, day to day. There's great power in 12. This is really, really cool. And I'm sorry, I can't really catch anyone up as they come because I'm tuning in to guidance that I have wanted this to come through so clearly for years. So here's the encouragement. Hundreds of years ago, a certain range of insight crystallized. This had the outer impact of the Renaissance, the Age of Enlightenment, truly great flowerings in relation to what was happening before. A lot of this involves reconnecting with ancient Greek philosophy, wisdom, and spiritual truth, Hermetic wisdom. But there were limits to how much could be done there because so much existed within the time of the karmic ocean. They knew full well that all these empires would grow and be dominated by dominators whose very presence inhibits the ability to communicate much of this truth and love. It is both incredibly powerful and resilient and fragile. It cannot coexist with the kind of hatreds that fuel wars. So you have to be enough at peace with yourself that you don't end up identifying with the spirit of war. The limitations were not completely possible to overcome. And so although the schools are not fundamentally hierarchical, it is almost impossible to bring someone into a new layer of knowledge without having some concept of where you're going to go. But as soon as you develop a concept of something you need to learn, you have a concept about that thing, which is invariably not that thing. Let me put it another way. My son is learning math. At first, he learned addition and then subtraction. Now he's learning multiplication, and we're trying to bring in division. When I introduce him to multiplication and division, I'm teaching him about a whole field of understanding, a whole way of working with numbers before he knows how to do that. So there is a lot of care that's necessary in how it's introduced. If I say, oh my God, this is going to enable you to da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, and I build it like that, the first thing he'll take in is a sort of an aura of excitement. He will glamorize what it would be to learn multiplication. Now, you could make a case that this has some relevance, but the way in which this gets in the way of learning new knowledge is profound. This is what the Roscrucians found, is that there were certain layers, wings of their study and knowledge, that people were getting stuck because they were living into a shared understanding of ignorance, an ignorant understanding of something akin to multiplication, a whole wing of awareness before people knew how to be aware in this way. And so essentially, their concept about what they had to learn was getting in the way of learning it. And this existed in large part because everyone still lived in a world where injustice and dominance were everywhere. You couldn't move from city to city without potentially encountering someone who might try to make you bribe them or pay a toll or steal from you or something. There was an ever-present relationship to hierarchical dominance based in energies that just destroyed the essence of the Rose Cross, the crystalline consciousness, Wildflowing-Fire. Now, I'll take this as a moment to pause and say, if you've listened to the Emerald Tablets, which I strongly encourage you to do, there are multiple references to flowers of fire in there. This is ancient, this experience of energy flowering and spirit birthing out of this energy. Don't conflate them. The life force that is capable of birthing through us could not live in an open, strong way hundreds of years ago. It had to live through subterranean currents. It had to be mystery schools with committed boundaries because they had to retain a boundary in order to prevent certain forms of spirit and life force and presence from infiltrating and undermining the integrity of the coherence. Let me put it another way. The essence of life is fractured here. Light gets fractured through the crystal of the earth into 12 rays. Now, you could make it many more, but be with the 12, because the unity of the 12 creates the harmonies of light. It's much like music. In this world, we live within the fractures of energy. And what we know of, what we're called to as oneness, is the ability to stop holding bias towards some rays of light and hatred or rejection or distaste even for others. You have to allow them to reunify as complete purity. You can't allow yellow to carry the baggage of, I don't really like that. It's that simple. But what that plays out as in the world is a like for one way of being and a rejection of another. The unity has to be preserved. Because if a spirit comes in and says, I'm Christian and no one else will be saved, that idea breaks crystalline consciousness, ironically. It's a complete misuse of the concept of Christ. And it turns crystalline consciousness into a concept that is inaccurate, which is a shorthand definition for all of Christianity in its institutional forms. In this lifetime, our calling is to bring to life some of the deepest truths of ancient mystery schools in a new form, without the baggage, without the anticipation and the expectation, without the even reverence, in a way that distances. There is a reverence that can distance. There's a reverence that says, that's you, not me. There's a reverence which takes the purity of light and love within ourselves and starts to only see it in another place, in another form, in another person. And this becomes very detrimental to growth because, yes, you've been introduced to the presence of such reverence, but you've been introduced to it through a concept that says it's not me. Now is a time to make such love and light normal. And the gift of this ability to connect in the way we are, everyone's ability to use the internet, is that it enables a higher degree of freedom for everyone who learns. For a long time, I was not able to see it. I think many of us still are we're not even close to the full potential yet. The potential says you can access the deepest wisdom. We can share here. I can answer your questions. We could honor and reflect and offer guidance even to each other, yet we have space. We're not going to drown in each other. You're not going to drown in me. You're not going to lose your autonomy to say, well, I wonder what Daniel thinks about everything. And the gift of this is very, very high. And perhaps more importantly, when the early mystery school lessons were being incubated, they were interdependent on those who believed. So there was one wall that said, are you in the mystery school? And they needed this wall because they were living in the karmic ocean. So they were building a bubble of crystalline energy that was in tune with the universe, as close as they could. But that bubble itself wasn't fully what they wanted it to be. There were limitations to how deep they could get it to embody. And so then those would surround others, much fewer in number, who could embody it. But once they embodied it, there was this new layer of challenge because people were like, oh my God, this is amazing. But they could only see it in that other's light and presence. And for this reason, they emphasized and developed the ability to telepathically learn. They would literally discourage physical participation for extended periods of time because you had to learn to link from afar. And when you do it this way, as I am inviting you and us to begin to do, I'm not the primary teacher. I mean, I've been glad to say something more along the lines of like, I'm your house fellow. Like in college, we would have like, 100 people would live in a dorm and there would be one senior who was there, who was like the house fellow. You'd go to them with your challenges or because you had questions or loneliness. They were a bit of a mentor. But the deep reverence is not supposed to go through me. Like, you might want to respect me. I do know a lot about how this works. And realistically, it's taken decades And it's really important that you not experience all this as if it's happening just through me. And I've been stuck because I know the current model, the model that we've had for these years that Wildflowerfire has started, has just ended up in this space all too often. And when I coach people not to overdo it with me, I've actually had a reverse problem where I've had people like, oh my God, folks, some of you fight with me too much. And it's like, this is a model of learning that works for some, but it has severe limitations. And I swear to you, it's pretty annoying. That is all a ramification of all of us trying to learn to learn in a better way. And I mean, I'm not complaining too much. I signed up for these for real. It's like a crucial ability to say no to a really strong new force, because when you're saying no to what you experience is coming through me, you gain the trust that you can hold it at bay, which allows you to, you gain influence, you gain time, because ultimately you are the best judge of many of the steps in your evolution and learning. You have to be. If you depend on me to draw your limits, there's a severe limit to how far, how fast, how broadly we can share. So it's all working the way it's supposed to work. And now, good morning, Juanita. Christopher. Thank you for being here. So now, I encourage you to trust that it does matter. It does matter how you do these. When you tune into yourself, and as I reinforce to you, you have the ability to tune in within you to a hermetic school, known by many names, but call it Thoth's temple. Seriously, this is the invitation. Thoth's temple is not in a physical form. It's a place. You have the ability to tune into this place. And when you intentionally do that, you are drawn there. You bring yourself there. And once you have, you will learn many of the lessons you must learn directly. We will never hold a video of every lesson that is to be learned. In fact, much of the work that we're doing here is simply designed to tune you in to Thoth. This is incredible. Like, all of this is coming through in such clarity, and it's like, don't keep going. So I keep having phases to share with you, and then it's enough. It's coming through much more clearly than normal. So, the pièce de résistance. Forgive me, Christopher. For the past 2 days, I've been introduced to something that apparently was the most magnificent reason that much of my life has been designed the way it is. And I get it enough to be daunted by sharing this. I know full well, for the little bit of research that I've done, that quite a few people could hear what I'm about to say and be like, there's no way they're going to believe it, right? And I just have to be at peace with that because again and again and again, they're saying, this is true. Say it, believe it, surrender. Don't resist. Don't hold this back. The key ring unlocks your access to the philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone was a concept. It's a spiritual stone that is created when we unify all the rays of light. When light is fractured, we see color. When light is brought back together, all of it, you get pure light again. When the rays of color are brought back together, if any are absent, doesn't work. The philosopher's stone is what happens when you balance all the rays of light within yourself so completely that you now have the potential to alchemize. And it starts with you. You first need to work on alchemizing the flawed, the weakness, the confusion, the woundedness, but the false paradigms and their impact on you, the baggage, the old skins within yourself. The Philosopher's Stone first teaches you how to do these. And the challenge for many ancient mystery schools, particularly the Roscrucians, was that they developed and shared this concept of the Philosopher's Stone, but they found that it became a distant attainment for many. Now, this serves in the same way that, many law of attraction videos will say, you don't want to say, I want that. Because when you do, you're imagining it over there. And you've now used your power to distance yourself from it. And you will end up reinforcing your lack of it. They were trapped in this challenge. And the more reverent people became to those who did learn how to alchemize light in this way, the more this challenge was reinforced. My teacher's just saying, keep going. In a past lifetime, I embodied the Philosopher's Stone. I accessed it. I can remember it. In so doing, I was transitioned into a space where I was very out of touch with the rest of the school, even at the time. And I was immediately introduced to the sense that the work I had to do was not going to be possible in that lifetime. And I had to agree to incarnate into a future lifetime that was entirely defined ahead of time by my commitment to teach this and share this knowledge. Now, this is a big deal. It's something that I've only been taught enough to understand. But essentially, for the most part, it is healthier to make your decisions about future lifetimes from outside of this life. So you probably have some introduction to a sense. You die and you go through a review with your guardian angels and you say, okay, what are you going to do next to try to cope with the way you live that lifetime, to build on your lessons, to learn the lessons that you failed, to contend with karma you may have created. To make a decision from within this lifetime that effectively plays a major role in defining future lifetimes, you have to access the kind of consciousness that transcends this lifetime, your soul. And that's what the Philosopher's Stone enables. It not only enables you to alchemize your pain and your woundedness, it enables you to embrace the coherence, the state of consciousness that is unified within this world, that it's sort of like, imagine if you had a tube, a telescope with a lot of different filters. You have to remove filter after filter after filter and bring in lens after lens after lens until you can see down the whole thing. If you have any one filter in the way, you can't even tell if you have other filters. You're just blocked. You have to bring all the light into coherence, or you're going to see through the lens of that imbalance. So within this lifetime, in the past, I did this. And I was immediately in the coherence that said, we're stuck. The school itself was stuck. We can't do what our soul moves us to want within this era. So I had to incarnate again with the full intention, with the entire framework of sharing this knowledge in a way that would work during the era when I would reincarnate. Now. And as soon as I accept it, boom, 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 all these clicks come into place. All these things come into place. I've been moving through layer upon layer of learning this knowledge all my life, committing to this knowledge all my life. But I had to do it in a form that didn't understand what was happening, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to learn about the key ring without being thrown out of balance so completely. In fact, when I first learned about it in this lifetime, I was like, I wanted to go tell venture capitalists. I was completely out of whack with how to handle it. All it meant was I could align my consciousness. But once I learned to align my consciousness, the work is to be in that aligned state, reflect on my major questions, and change my life based on that unity and alignment. And I was haphazard at best at doing this. So I would go through extremes. I would be incapable of ignoring it. It was earth-shattering. It would change me for weeks, months. But the way I thought about the change I'd been through was still tainted by my past, by filters through which they would come back into my vision. So doing the work to remove those filters it's a whole new phase of study. And it's the one you're invited to keep participating in, because this is what you're doing. Each of you has your own relationship to the depth of crystalline consciousness. And I would suggest that many of you embody it more truly than you may believe. But it's been important not to overemphasize this so you don't lose track of where your attention needs to remain. Ultimately, the attention on the keyring causes us to tend 12 filters. 12 filters as rays of light. And these filters translate into different aspects of our lives. If any of the 12 chakras are out of balance, it reflects an out of balance in our spiritual energy. Human beings have been designed in this way on purpose. So if you consistently reject your own intuition about your needs, you refuse, basic layers of guidance on how to move through your day in a healthy way and feed yourself healthy, good foods of thought, good foods of body, good foods of heart. If you don't do that, you're bringing clouds into your ability to see. If you reject your sense that part of you is angry to be in a situation where again and again your voice is blocked, where you're not honored, where you're not respected, if you think your way out of that by consistently making excuses for the people who talk over you, by internalizing it and thinking it's your fault, by registering that maybe it wasn't as important as I thought, whoosh, you're bringing clouds into your vision. So in this way, we can clarify our vision or return to cloudedness. And it's an ongoing challenge. You need not to think about it as if you're traveling and you get across the finish line and it's over. It's not like that. It's the reverse. You embody something closer to crystalline consciousness and then you lose it. And then you embody it and then you lose it. And the way to tend yourself is to move through the keyring in this way, because the keyring is moving through all 12 significant rays of light, which correlate to all 12 chakras, which correlate to 12 general fields of care that we need to maintain for ourselves. The more we do this, the more it works. Ooh. Thank you for being here. This is a wild run. And I want to leave you with an emphasis. We often know of wild as something chaotic. Children are wild if they throw things and break the window. Grown-ups are wild when they get drunk, could make a scene at a bar. Wildness is far from this. We've developed this understanding of wildness because we've aborted our relationship to nature. We've associated our body and our relationship to feelings and passions with getting out of hand. We've been taught to restrain ourselves in a way that healthy animals don't need to do. Squirrels don't calculate. They trust. They have a deep innate sense of faith. They can make that jump and they do it. They're not thinking, I should flex my bicep when I land. Wildness, when it's healthy, is in tune with nature. We exist in a world that is deeply out of tune with nature because human society only knew how to restrain deep passions by rejecting nature itself, by understanding ourselves as superior. And as a result, we have factory farms that abuse animals, and we are the greatest destroyer on the planet. Redeem this relationship to nature in your understanding of what it means to be wild. To be wild is first to go a little haywire, to be like this. That's happening because you haven't been in tune. And as soon as the power moves through you on such a level that you awaken your sensation and your attunement with nature and the rhythms of the weather and the cycles of the year, it goes a little haywire frequently. Move through it. Understand the angers will surge, the desires will surge, and it's your job to just bring them into coherence. Remember yourself. Tune into your innate ability to talk to your spirit through your chakras and your heart. It's often as simple as when you have an extreme passion of any sort, how does your heart feel? Really, that question is enough to take care of a high percentage of the challenges of becoming wild. Because things that are out of tune with your heart, there's a problem. And if you immediately question your passions that way, you'll resist the urge to just go with the strongest force in your experience, which is by no means the best idea. By no means. But you also don't want to live a life that's built on restraint. You do not want to live a life that's predicated on holding back the greatest forces all the time. You just want to be able to channel them. And as you do, you will tune into the world around you in a way that transcends. You will find yourself an extended phase where you're no longer standing out quite as much. You can move through your day, you can move through your neighborhood and community and even your family, and you'll be dealing with less drama than they are, and you'll be able to help as long as you learn to navigate that well. Let people fall on their own. Don't use your newfound power and awareness to take care of everyone all the time, thus depriving them of the lessons they need to learn. Find that balance, because it's in this balance that you can continue to learn and tune in more deeply so you find Thoth's temple on your own. We're here to help you do that. We're here to help you refine it when you forget. It's awesome.